Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. For those of you who are not familiar with me yet, my name's Elizabeth Wright, and I am so happy to be working with CCC Leadership, and with Heather, I am the Director of Programs and Community. And with that, so I'll be leading this workshop on strategies and tips on leading a high-performing team, even with difficult teammates. Sorry, I have a bit of a frog, so I may mute myself from time to time to clear it out. I am basing this workshop on the book by Amy Gallo called Getting Along, and it's there on the screen if you are interested in purchasing your own copy and reading it as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Heather.
So I join Elizabeth in welcoming everyone today. I'm so glad to see so many familiar faces where Baylor Scott and White is representing, and alumni and friends we don't know yet. So I just love that. CCC Leadership Program. The C stand for clarity, communication, and community. And this is the part of the C I love most this morning here, where we join with community. So I'm really excited to have you all. And for those of you that don't know much about the program itself, we are sharing 2023 dates. We're offering 3 different classes, cohorts, if you will. One in the spring, one in the summer, and one in the fall. So if you want more information about that, please let us know. These are monthly workshops that we will be doing. We'll be going over books, videos, maybe anything that's kind of on our mind. You're going to get a survey when we're done, and we ask you to share with us any subjects or ideas that are popping up for you and maybe your organization that you would like us to discuss. So these are meant to be interactive. Elizabeth's going to present a synopsis of the book and the kind of the highlights. If you have questions as we go along, please just put them there in the chat, and we will tackle those, and we'll have a nice discussion at the end. And I think if everybody would just mute themselves, which it looks like everybody is, so request already granted, we'll get started, and then we'll have a nice discussion when Elizabeth is finished.
Awesome. Okay, so like I said, the workshop today is based on the work by Amy Gallo in her book called Getting Along. And she goes over 8 different archetypes of difficult coworkers. And it's more of just 8, not coworkers per se, but kind of characteristics of people. And so I'm going to break it up into how the author did as well, and go over the different archetypes. And what we'll go with is, with each archetype, I'll go over some common behaviors, and then more importantly, questions we ask ourselves and tactics we might try. And so these are the archetypes here. And I know when I was reading through the list, and especially the first one, the insecure boss, I got a little bit hung up. And so I just want to quickly level set with y'all and myself. And so I know that I kind of got caught up with, oh my gosh, I spiraled a little bit in thinking about my experiences with an archetype. And that's not really what we're focusing on here. We're focusing on control the controllables. And so if you're not familiar with the amygdala hijack, the amygdala is part of your brain, and it's about the size of like an almond. It's very small, but it's very powerful. And essentially, the amygdala is what happens when you're in conflict, or what your brain senses as danger, and it activates that fight flight mode. And so this is really just kind of a level set for us that we're going to have visceral reactions to conflict, right? Visceral reactions to our difficult archetypes in our colleagues. And so just kind of reminding ourselves that this is real conflict and we have real responses to this. And so just kind of level set ourselves, that to remind ourselves that the space between the stimulus, the actions, and then our response, we can grow that. We have control over that. And then also just do kind of a self-appraisal Am I hydrated? Am I hungry? Am I worried about something else, right? What else might be going on with our own self? And so just kind of level set ourselves when we're going into this conflict. And so let's start with the first archetype here. It is the insecure boss. And so a lot of times they'll attempt to control everything about the team or project, and they'll require that every decision and detail has their approval. And a lot of times they'll gatekeep interactions with colleagues from other departments or senior leaders in an attempt to control the flow of information and resources. So those are common behaviors in this first archetype. So we can ask ourselves, one of Marcia Clark's favorite questions to ask, what else might be true, right? What else might be going on there? And so, excuse me, there we go. So use we language to signal that you're on the same team as them. It helps kind of to discuss the goals and align them with your company's values. And I know, so I had a boss who exhibited a lot of these archetype behaviors, and it's a lot simpler, and it requires a lot less energy if I would have just appreciated and verbally appreciated their contributions. And so just some things to think about when we're dealing with the insecure boss archetype. So archetype number 2. So oftentimes they can be reluctant to try innovative or new ways of approaching projects. And complaining does have its place, but when it goes unchecked, it only grows and spreads to other colleagues. So some questions we ask ourselves. So a lot of times an organization will try something for a short amount of time, and then it slowly falls off again. So it really takes consistency as a leader to reinforce that positive buy-in. So if you're trying something new, make sure that there's some longevity built into that. Because if it falls off, like sometimes it may, that only reinforces their pessimistic attitude about trying something new. And also remember that in the absence of information, people make up their own stories, right? And so level set with yourself. Do they know the goal? Are they familiar with the project? And do they have the information they need to make an informed decision? So some tactics here. So I love reframing. It's probably one of my favorite things to try to do. And so reframe their cynicism that they're using their unique perspective to help the team see potential risk. So that ability to point out potential flaws is often an undervalued attribute. And this is a phrase here that the author came up with is consider making disagreeer in chief part of their formal role. Put that on the agenda in the discussion, and that'll also help kind of limiting and the amount of pessimism that goes on. If you put it on the agenda and say, okay, we're gonna hear from this person about what might go wrong, and then you can hear that and then move on. So archetype number 3. So they often blame failures on external factors, why they missed a deadline, etc. And it's also really important to remember that a victim's habits are often rooted in real pain, response to trauma, manipulation, or betrayal or neglect. So it's just, again, it's that level set of why are they behaving this way, get curious, etc. So what do we ask ourselves? So are they being targeted by colleagues? Pay attention to dynamics in meetings. You know, who or what might trigger this victim mentality. So after offering this validation, move on to positive and genuine feedback. Ask them, if you got to make the decisions, what would you do differently? And are they afraid to stand up for themselves? Do they know the resources they have within the company, whether it be HR, trainings, etc.? And finally, and this is especially after you've gone over the same thing maybe multiple times with this person, change the subject. Protect yourself. Change the subject when they start complaining. So archetype number 4. So this is the passive aggressive peer, and I'm really good at this. I'm unfortunately very good at this. And my favorite is I say that I'm fine when obviously my body language tells a very different story. And then it also is ignoring deadlines after they've agreed to meet them, or promising to send an email that never arrives. And they'll say things such as, wow, you have such a relaxed style, AKA, I don't think you care about your physical appearance. So a lot of passive aggressive behavior stems from the fear of failure, rejection, conflict, being powerless or lacking influence, and the desire for perfection, being liked, harmony, and exerting control. So being passive aggressive is the passive way for them to feel in control. So when they're not sending that email they promised to send, they're passively taking that control. And then also, when do they exhibit this behavior? Is it before a big meeting? Is it when certain colleagues are present? So some tactics to try. Just like whenever someone tells me, just calm down, that doesn't work, right? That just triggers me a little bit more. So avoid calling them passive aggressive. Focus on what their content is and not the delivery. And then also don't take that bait when they say something like, not sure you saw my email, or per my last email. Just say, thanks for the reminder, or thanks for the recap. And then also, in a way to preempt passive aggressive behavior, you can do this with direct requests, with tangible tasks and deadlines, and that helps tamp down the opportunity for the passive aggressive behavior to rear its head. Next archetype is that know-it-all. That's fun. We've all heard the my way or the highway, right? They're just immediately signaling that they're not going to cooperate or compromise. They like to speak over people. They don't really take a breath and let other people provide input. And they really don't display a lot of curiosity or ask questions. So what do we ask ourselves? So similar to the insecure boss archetype, the know-it-all may suffer from imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome, and they may be overcompensating by trying to prove how knowledgeable they are. This is something I ask myself a lot because I, believe it or not, in large meetings, I tend to be very quiet, introverted. I really don't share my opinions or thoughts. And so is their style of interacting so different than mine that I'm perceiving them to be overly confident? So is this more of a bias that I have based on my own behavior? And also, does this behavior go beyond kind of, oh, that's annoying, or is it having really damaging repercussions to the team and to the team's mission? So some tactics we can go over with ourselves is focus on the content and maybe not the delivery. If you're giving a presentation, so Heather set some ground rules, right, before we started, saying if you have questions, drop them in the chat. And that's just, a lot of times people love to give their opinions, and that's great. But if you know that it's going to kind of derail the meeting and it's going to go longer than it maybe should, then just say something like, I know many of you will have questions or comments. I would appreciate it if you hold them until the end of the presentation. Ask them to back it up. If they are very insistent on their way or idea is the superior one, ask them for some facts and data and have them present it to you. And then finally, If they do continue to interject, talk over people, ask them to stop. And you may need to ask them a few times, because remember, someone has to hear something 8 times before they'll believe it. So they may not even realize or recognize they're interrupting. And you may have to say it over and over and over again until you kind of feel like you're being so repetitive, but they may, for the 8th time, be hearing it for the first time. All right, archetype number 6, the tormentor. So this is someone who, no matter how we're performing, always comes back with, it could have been better. They always find the negative. It's never good enough. And of course, there's always room for growth and improvement, but never being good enough is an exhausting response to hard work and effort. And they will proudly and repetitively share the sacrifices they've made in their career, and they expect you to do the same. And they'll claim their mistreatment is some sort of character building. It's that pointy elbows, right? That they had to kind of elbow their way into the table, and they expect you to have to do the same thing. And in fact, oftentimes they'll believe that if it was hard for them, it should be hard for you as well. And all of that really is just a fundamental misunderstanding of what effective leadership is. They take it as a command and control approach. So what do we ask ourselves? Again, what else might be true? What does the organization look like? Is it a cutthroat environment? Is this the way your organization recognizes and promotes people? And is this a, iron sharpening iron situation? Are they helping, or do they think they're helping? Kind of reassess why they're pushing that, why they're constantly pointing out the flaws, and see how they might be thinking they're helping when they may or may not be. So we encourage empathy, and the best way I have found to encourage empathy is to ask them for their advice. Invite them to stand in your shoes, right? Bring the situation to them and say, here it is. What would you do if you were me, right? Again, remind them that you're on the same team. Use we statements. So the next archetype, is the biased coworker. They say things like, oh, you're so articulate, or everyone can make it here if they just try hard enough and just do good work. Or one of my favorites, and I got this a lot in my previous work, was you don't look old enough to be a manager, a colleague, a director, whatever it might be. And then they'll say stereotypes as reality. And then there's this benevolent bias. And so it's a colleague who says, oh, so-and-so just got back from parental leave, so they wouldn't want to be a part of this project they would normally be on because it requires a lot of travel, and they have a newborn at home. So they wouldn't want to have to be on this project that, that causes them or requires them to travel. And that's a benevolent bias, where the person may think that they're being considerate and thoughtful of a colleague, and in reality, they're excluding them without even bringing that colleague into the conversation to begin with. So who was the target? Were you the target, or did you witness it? If you witnessed it, you have a greater responsibility to speak up. This is that bystander effect. And then what are the risks of speaking up or of not speaking up? And not only does your company, ask yourself, does the organization want us to speak up? but also really make sure you understand all of the resources that you do have. So this was a hard one for me, to be quite honest, to foster a growth mindset, but it's really important to believe in the person's capacity and their desire to learn and change, and for us to be open to their willingness to change. Because remember, it's about the behavior, not the person. Slow down and think through what happened. Part of this is having a set response ready. So something like, I'm not sure you meant to say that, or I don't understand, or what information are you basing that on? So kind of having those responses allows you, again, to build that space between the stimulus and your response. So of course, avoiding the you statements. So instead of saying something about them, say that comment was hurtful or offensive or inappropriate or incorrect. And seek out an ally who will be your accomplice. So if you find yourself the victim of the biased coworker, consider finding someone in your organization who may be in those same meetings, and ask them to say something, to speak up. Ask for someone to be your accomplice. The last archetype is the political operator. So sometimes they'll take someone else's credit or success as their own. They're very competitive and very unwilling to be cooperative. They view everybody as their opponent, as someone to beat, and often unwilling to share critical details or invite you to meetings. So what do we ask ourselves? So again, is it a cutthroat environment, right? How is your organization? How does it operate? And all offices are political. So sometimes we have to look at ourselves and say, how do we position ourselves better and yet still remain authentic and maintain our morals and ethics? So if they spread rumors about you, don't do the same, of course, right? And then be proactive. Keep your team and your managers up to date on your projects and how you're contributing your time, ideas, etc. They may not know that you're working and you're collaborating with somebody in a different department. So make sure you share those things with them. And political operators tend to see everybody as competition. So when you offer help and collaboration, it may disarm them and cause them to reevaluate their tactics and their viewpoints. So we've gone over the 8 archetypes of coworkers and colleagues and teammates. You may have thought of some people as I went through the slides. Like I said, I know when I read the book, I was definitely thinking of some people. And then just focusing on those questions and tactics we try, controlling the controllables. So the author goes over 9 principles for getting along with anyone, which made me kind of chuckle. So number 1, focus on what you can control ourselves, right? That's the number 1 thing we can control. Remember that your perspective is just one perspective. Be aware of your biases. Question your interpretation. So imagine there are 3 entities to a situation. It's you, your colleague, and the dynamic between you. And we often perceive slights to be worse than they were intended to be. And then make a tangible list of small goals. Something as straightforward as, I'm not going to think about this person when I'm having dinner with my family or my friends. I'm not getting paid, right, to think about this person outside of work time. And then revisit your mission statement or write a new one. um, ask them, isn't that fascinating? And remember, when you're experimenting to find what works, again, remember that 8 times rule. Somebody has to hear something or experience something 8 times before they'll believe it. And finally, be curious, but also stay curious. It's that longevity point that will really get you through. And sometimes it's just not going to work out, right? We either coach someone to stay in a job or we coach them on to the next thing. And so that's just, sometimes it's just not going to work out. Teach people how they treat you, right? And also know how to escalate if needed. And finally, again, back to that level set, take care, right? In the book, the author reminds us of a few tips or tactics we can try or that we can use to help us take care of our mental, physical, and emotional well-being. So control the controllables. For those of you who went through CCC or Power of Self, remember we had that worksheet on who are the people we go to when we have our work or personal crises, celebrations, questions, etc. Try to find like-minded people who are interested in positive interactions. Have a life outside of work. That sounds a little abrasive, but it's something as simple as, for example, I love playing the piano. So I'll just take 15, 20 minutes and go play the piano. Or if you have a commute, listen to a podcast that you find absolutely hysterical, right? Just those small things that we can do. And then finally, self-compassion is really important. And it's not just me saying it. Research has established an absolute myriad of benefits from self-compassion. It creates a stronger desire to grow and improve. It increases emotional intelligence and deeper resilience. And it also makes you more compassionate to others. So that is what I have on the presentation, and I'll turn it over to Heather.
That was awesome. So, okay, so everyone, if you would like to put your questions in chat or unmute yourself and ask. I forgot at the beginning, I was supposed to ask everybody to also introduce themselves in the chat. So if you would like to just put your name and your organization in the chat, maybe even the link to your LinkedIn so that everyone on this call can connect outside of this, that would be awesome as well. I just want to put an exclamation point on this material as it relates to those of us that lead. So if we have people like this in our organization, so for those of you that have gone through the programs, we're talking about those characteristics of a high performing team, right? So if we have these folks on our team, how is their behavior affecting others, right? So what story is everyone else making up around why Sally gets to get away with her passive aggressive behavior, right? So thinking about and reminding that when we have behaviors like this, so if this is a consistent high performing employee and they start to dip here, do we wait until they've dipped all the way down there with behavior? No, right at the beginning. So just a reminder that when this kind of behavior starts to bubble up, whether it's because there's something else going on in their life or whatnot, that's when you attack it. You don't wait until it's been going on for months. And so I want to remind you of that, and thinking about getting curious about why this behavior is happening, what is going on for this person. So I think the material is so interesting, and it kind of, when it gets to chapter 12 is called when all else fails. Mm-hmm. And I think we all get there at some point with employees, whether they report to us or not. And remembering that there has to be consequences for action, right? So we can make requests. So first of all, when we are trying to correct a behavior, not a person, but a behavior, it needs to have very specific. It's a very specific request in a very specific time period, right? So, and if that isn't met, then what are those? What are those things that are going to happen that is the discipline part of that? Because without discipline, requests are just that, they're just requests. So thinking about when all else fails, and I love, she talked a lot about the should I quit piece. And I want to remind us all that we have to, these days, because of the work we do and how hard we work and how much we care, we have to work in concert with our values, right? So if something is of value and it's being rubbed up against every day, then you can't, it is hard. It is mentally exhausting to be in that role, to be in that situation. So I just wanted to, it's such a great book, and it just really hits upon a lot of the principles that we talk about in our programs. And we need to be reminded of, right? Like it doesn't always, none of us are perfect, right? And unfortunately, we're dealing with human beings. So it can't be A plus B equals success. It has to be, how we're handling, how we're, working in concert. And I think, I did a piece recently with a group in North Texas around feedback, so positive and negative, right? So feedback is a gift when given with the thought of, I am giving you this feedback because I care about your success, right? So I'm not giving you this feedback because I hate you and I want to make you wrong, which, sometimes we can have that going on in our head, but really giving feedback in the spirit of this, I know this will be helpful for you and I really want to share it. So thinking about that, and thinking about also positive feedback. So research tells us that when we give negative feedback, we need to give 4 or 5 times the amount of positive feedback. Now that may sound like a lot. So I'm talking about, meeting in the hallway and saying, hey, really great job on that presentation yesterday. You were, really succinct and I appreciated it. Or I know you've been working hard lately and I appreciate. So, positive has to outweigh the negative. We're only human. We wouldn't like it if someone was constantly giving us corrective, right, feedback. So also remember that with the bad, we also need more good. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute because we've got some questions coming in. And Elizabeth, I'm going to ask you to stop sharing so I can see better. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Amanda. I sometimes find that when I work to reframe with a pessimist, I'm faced with claims that I'm engaging in toxic positivity. Right. Oh my gosh, toxic positivity. Yeah, right. So I think that, so I guess I would get curious about who is claiming that you're doing the toxic positivity, right? So I have the pleasure of knowing you pretty well, and you're living in your truth, right? And so, and I know, I think that getting more curious about what the pessimist is coming to you with may help you not go to reframe first, right? So because when we get curious about why someone is saying something or asking something or doing something, we may actually get to the root of what's going on, as opposed to, we're correcting the symptoms, but we're not really, we're not figuring out how we stop it, right? How we get around. And also remember, people need to know the why. They don't always they need a little bit more than go do this or we are doing this. They may need the why behind that. Is that helpful? Did you want to say anything else about it?
No, that's super helpful. I tend to default to reframe because
Mm-hmm.
it's easiest for me to just be like, hey, but look at this. And
Right.
I think it's important for me to not automatically go to trying to make them feel better about it. So
Yeah.
that's actually really helpful.
Yeah. And, you know, you could also explain. So I think sometimes when we explain who we are to people, and we say, gosh, you know, I tend to default to positivity. So, you know, I'm gonna go there first, and then maybe we could talk about some other things that could actually go wrong, right?
Yeah. Just carry around my like Myers-Briggs card and be
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
that's awful. Thank you.
No, that's true. Okay, who else? And if you want to, if you don't want to type, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, I will. This is Tracy.
Hey, Tracy.
Hi. So obviously I was commenting to Amanda that I do this probably, my kids comment on it more than anybody else, because I think they have seen the pattern over time about, you know, they'll come to me with a complaint or an issue or a challenge. And my default a lot of times is to reframe. And it makes them feel really unheard and incompetent, that they didn't come up with that themselves. And so I have, and I'm so not there, because I just got this feedback like in the last year. So I'm still working on it. But I for sure am having to just listen and do all the empathy about, wow, that must be really hard. And, you know, that must suck and all of that, like just be in it with them in that way without having to go to the instant reframe. So I'm right there with you, Amanda.
Yeah, Guy, you bring up such a great point. Like, this is, Tracy, an aha moment for me, because I do this with my mom, who likes to talk about, you know, how she doesn't feel well or whatever. And so if I'm my best self, my reaction is, wow, that must be tough. I'm sorry you don't feel well, or tell me more about it. So, because a lot of times, is it true that people just want to be heard?
Yeah.
You know, and I think as in relationships, and when we talk about venting and solving and all of that, when we go to vent, we may need to tell the person we're venting to, hey, I just need you to hold space for me. I just need you to listen. I don't need a solution. I just need to get this off my chest, right? So when we approach, because I know, especially in my male relationship, that person wants everything to be wonderful for me, right? And so a lot of the times he's in there trying to fix it, and I'm like, but I just wanted you to listen. Why didn't you know that? So we do other people a favor by telling them what we need from them. So. Oh, Lee, I love that. Yep. No, allow them to find the positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, if they can. Okay, what else? What other questions are coming up? Any specific, we could workshop a difficult a difficult situation that you may be having, personal or professional. Thank you all for putting your names in the chat. And I think that I'll go a little bit deeper into the should I leave, because that is a lot that is going on right now, right? It's so easy for us after pandemic or during whatever we're in right now, to say, oh, things are tough, so I'm out of here, right? And I really encourage, when a client comes to me with that, a coaching client, my default is, are you running from something? Right? Because the good news is, in all of this, we get to control our reaction to it. And so, when we think about quitting or leaving a situation, because of a difficult boss or a difficult colleague, you know, the question really does become, what are you, you know, are you going to something or are you running from something? And so, you know, running from something is not really, in my mind, the answer. It's really more, if it has gotten though to a place where it affects your mental health, some other things, then we are really talking about moving on. And sometimes that's the only answer, and that's unfortunate. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So what else? It's a quiet Friday group. I love it. I love it. Well, so I apologize, Elizabeth. I know we had one more slide, and I just totally, if you want to throw that up there so we can talk about where we go next. So we're going to start doing these monthly, and so we figured for kind of November and December get a little wonky, so we're going to do one kind of in the middle on December 2nd, and we're going to talk about the power of practicing gratitude. So right after Thanksgiving and before the Christmas holidays, talking about how gratitude can be folded into your life. I'm a firm believer that these tactics and the tools and the things that we talk about in this group and in our programs really are things that we start to integrate into every day. It's not, oh my gosh, I have to, you know, schedule 2 hours on Wednesday morning to practice my gratitude, right? It's more, where can I put it in? How does it affect, and what's the easiest way to do that? So we'll be doing gratitude on Friday, December 2nd. So, and as I said, we're going to send out a simple 3-question survey. What'd you like? What would you change? And then the third one is, what would you like to see us cover? So we'll send that out, and would love to hear from you and know what you're thinking and what your challenges are. We tend to have a pretty 30,000 foot view of what's going on in our community here in North Texas. And I encourage you all, when you get the next link to sign up for the next one, share it with someone. We want these to be open to a wider audience, and we got some generous funding from the MR and Evelyn Hudson Foundation, and we're able to offer these monthly. And so we'll do a combination of books. We may pick an article or whatnot, but we'll come to you every month with something that hopefully just reminds you, because none of this material is like cutting edge, brand new ideas, right? It's sometimes we just need to be reminded, a slow down to speed up, or get curious, or whatever it is. So I'm going to give you back 13 minutes of your life. Elizabeth and I will stay on if you'd like to talk about anything specific, but thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you on December 2nd.